back. We're here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice. Preseason week 2, Saturday. FanDuel and DraftKings, everything you need here for tonight's 8-game slate. 8 games, the biggest preseason slate we've had so far this year. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, multi-time preseason DFS GPP winner. And we got a live Q&A here, 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how many questions we get, how many people are watching, and how much we get through here. I'm currently watching Chiefs Lions on my office TV here. We got about 2 hours until the main slate starts, so let's go ahead and do it. I will, while we're waiting for questions, I'll talk about some of the high-level situations and players that we're looking to play for tonight. Hint, it is the Rams. Shout out to Ozzy in the chat saying play Rams in preseason. Print money. This is a solo stream, as you see. So you guys will help push this stream along. If you're in the chat, if you're watching, say what's up. Go ahead and drop your questions in the chat as well. So we got AI in the chat. Taylor, what's up, guys? Appreciate you joining in. Thanks for watching. We'll have a good time here. So first shout out to our staff member Smitty, who took down the early Showdown slate for 2K. Big ups to him. Like to see the hard work pay off for the staff as well. And then one of our members won first place solo in the Thursday night single game GPP, 25K on DraftKings. So shout out to Pit Panther as well. Occupy's been crushing preseason. You're in the right place if you're watching this for the first time. All right, so let's actually talk about the Rams first and foremost. If you played last week, if you played preseason DFS in the past, you know Sean McVay historically rest anyone and everyone that is remotely important to the team for the regular season. Last week was no different. And his comment this week after their practices was even more intense because he said, we'll probably hold out even more guys this week. And I think one of the biggest things we have to think about is Jordan Whittington. I'll pull him up here on DraftKings for you. He was our top play last week. Mostly everyone's top play was pretty highly owned on that Sunday 2-game slate. And he impressed. And we feel like he's going to fall in line with the Puka Nacua trend of last year where they get this guy out there, they play him a lot in preseason week 1, realize how valuable he is as a draft pick. McVay said as much that Whittington is going to be important to our team. Put all the pieces together, it sounds like Whittington will sit here. If there's no news, this could be a pretty big edge. Because I imagine a lot of people are going to want to play him after his performance last week. We expect him to sit, so just keep that in mind. We'll monitor pregame reports. They weren't very good last week for LA, so fingers crossed we get some news. But we have a feeling that Whittington's going to sit. We'll have guys like Xavier Smith, Sam Wiglusz, Dylan Stoops, Tyler Johnson, J.J. Lapp in his place. All those guys are pretty safe. Whittington definitely not safe. And yeah, as Eli says in the chat, Whittington was a receiving monster last week. Yeah, he was pretty good and looked good in their joint practices as well. So yeah, we think Whittington is going to sit. So how many Rams? What is a good number of Rams to play? Now, if you followed our advice last week, if you watched Chris's video on Sunday, we said no amount of Rams is too many Rams because it was only a 2-game slate. We have 8 games tonight. So, lots of ways that these Rams get outscored. Lots of ways Stetson Bennett fails to produce, as we saw for a good portion of last week's game. I think 3 is probably a good number here. You're playing low-risk contest. 3 is probably a good number. I think high-risk, cap yourself at 3. I think you probably include at least 1. So, AI says, is Boston Scott going to play the entire game? Yeah, that was pretty funny, right? We had a feeling that was a possibility because of how much veteran Royce Freeman played for them in preseason week 1 last year. What was surprising was Ronnie Rivers not playing last week. It was just Zach Evans and Boston Scott. Now, if you read our daily plug, which is up, occupyfantasy.com, if you're not a member, you've never seen it before, this is what it looks like. This is last year's example plug. Top plays each position, stack options, showdown rankings, lineup strategy tips, and then player notes and playing time trends for every team on the slate. That is up for tonight's slate, all 8 games. And if you read the trend in the running back section from the Rams, you see that Last week they flipped, or last year they flipped playing time between preseason week 1 and preseason week 2. So we actually expect Zach Evans to lead the Rams tonight, especially when you consider Boston Scott is like a 10-year veteran. So Zach Evans is our top running back play tonight. And yeah, Taylor points out something really important. We actually have a note on this in our plug. Wigloos, whose name I could very well be mispronouncing, Sam Wigloos, got smacked pretty good at the end of the game last week. Left late. Hadn't seen any news on if he's playing or not. Rams have had 0 reports on if he's playing. We looked at practice reports and injury absences, and Wigloos has not been on that list, so we assume he is practicing. We're trying to reach out to Beats as much as we can. If we get definitive word, we will certainly update you guys. We're proceeding as if he's playing. They haven't made any roster moves, so we're going to go ahead and assume that Wigloos is playing. But I do see the concern. We're well aware of it, and we are monitoring it. All right, speaking of lots of playing time, let's talk about quarterbacks. Again, if you guys have questions, throw them in the chat. We'll go a little position by position here. And really, unless you're playing 150 lineups, and even then, you should probably only consider these 3 guys tonight. There are some guys that are going to play a half, maybe a little more, but there are 3 guys that you should consider playing. If you're not playing one of these 3 guys in cash, low risk, small field, 20 max, 3 max, whatever, you're behind the 8 ball, and you're not going to cash, probably. One is Trey Lance of the Dallas Cowboys. We had this decision to make last week. Ultimately, it didn't matter too much. Lance outscored Stetson Bennett by like a 1.5. Didn't matter. Lance played all but 1 series last week. We expect pretty similar this week. We saw the Cowboys do this last preseason with Will Grier. Different motivations. Last year, they were trying to trade Will Grier. This year, they're just trying to get reps for Trey Lance, just in general, but also in their offensive system, as he hasn't played a ton, despite being drafted in the first round a few years ago. So we expect roughly the same amount for Trey Lance. No definitive reporting, but we're guessing Lance gets bare minimum a half, which is good. And he ran more last week than he did all in his preseason games with the 49ers previously. So maybe that's a system thing. So we got some rushing upside there. Bennett is going to play 80% to a full game as well. Yes, he threw 4 interceptions. Did throw the touchdown, but threw for 200 yards. You get a guy playing a full game in a great offensive system. Stetson Bennett is a guy that you have to consider. And if you don't want to play him after 4 interceptions, I totally get it. I'm going to be playing him. Has the only, maybe Lance too, but only guy who can play an entire game on this slate. And finally, it's Malik Willis, who's going to play the least amount of these 3. Going to play at least a half, but the dude rushes like crazy in preseason DFS. 40 yards last week, basically averaged 40, 60 yards a preseason game. In a half of work, he can do what many quarterbacks can do in a full game of work. So Willis not the most polished passer, but his rushing upside makes him one of the best plays anytime that he's on a preseason slate and playing at least a half. And that's what we have tonight. So Willis, Bennett, and Lance, if you're not playing one of those 3 guys, start over and play one of those 3. Eli, which Seattle running back do you like more between Holani and McIntosh? Holani's been getting all the buzz, right? McIntosh, guy they drafted late last year, I think 7th round last year, was dealing with some injuries to start camp. Holani's been the guy. So I think, again, we're splitting hairs here. We expect both those guys to get good reps. Let's just bring them up here so we know who we're talking about. George Holani and Kenny McIntosh. Holani's has been getting more buzz. He'll be higher owned too, so just keep that in mind. I think both guys are a great plays tonight on such a large slate. Going back to Ozzy's question, it is not confirmed that Bennett plays the whole game again, but all the conversations from the coaching staff, particularly Sean McVay, have been very similar wording to what they said last week. We need to get Stetson reps. We're not going to play Stafford or Garoppolo. Bennett needs to get reps. There's a chance Dresser Wynn plays 20%. He did in this game last year. So we think 80-20 is the bare minimum. Again, we're going by trends and what the coaches are saying. No full concrete reporting on how much these guys are going to play, though. A big lack of reporting in general this year, but also this week in particular. To answer Gabe's question, I don't think he'll be the highest owned by far, right? Because he threw 4 interceptions last week. We have guys like Willis. We have an 8-game slate. We have Trey Lance. I don't think he'll be the highest owned by far. I'm going to do an industry check here after we get off stream. I'll post in Discord who I think the highest owned plays at each position will be, because ultimately that does matter. But to answer your question, I don't think he'll be the highest owned by far. He might not even be the highest owned, period. All right, moving on. We talked about the Rams running backs, Zach Evans, Boston Scott. I still think there's a chance Ronnie Rivers plays. Maybe I'm naive here. Maybe he's just fully locked into the roster. I don't know. But if we look at the Rams running backs, Kyron Williams is going to sit. Blake Corum's going to sit. Last week, Ronnie Rivers sat, and it was just Boston Scott and Zach Evans. We expect the script to flip and Zach Evans to lead the way this week. They do switch stuff around from time to time in preseason, so it wouldn't shock me to see Rivers play. But again, Zach Evans is the guy we like the most. And then Miami is dealing with some injuries in their backfield. So Mostert and Devin Achane are going to play with the starters probably a quarter. Jeff Wilson broke his nose last week. Sounds like he's out. And so it means we have Jalen Wright, Salvin Ahmed, who did not play last week, but is going to play this week. He's an extremely sneaky, high-risk play. Salvin Ahmed returned to the joint practices on Thursday. Obviously dynamic. We've seen him break open preseason slates previously, I think just as recent as last year. And then Chris Brooks. So we got three guys getting a quarter each and one of the best run offenses in the league. Really like the Miami guys as well tonight. All right, if you guys have questions, throw them in. It's 5:11. I'm sticking around for at least 15 minutes total. That's 5:15, but probably 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how many questions we do get. Let's see, I see the Chiefs are up 13-3. Shockingly, Andy Reid lied a little bit about how much playing time Patrick Mahomes was going to get. And that is the downside when playing starters like this, because they have an idea in their mind how much they're going to play Mahomes a half. But if they play better or more efficiently, and Mahomes led them on 2 scoring drives, then it's like, okay, I've seen what I need to see from the starters. Let's get him out of there. Let's not risk injury. Really, he'll play a half if he's playing poorly. So you don't really get the upside of these starters playing potentially what they could be playing. So, so just keep that in mind as you're playing these guys. All right, questions, let's get them in. We talked about quarterbacks. We talked about running backs. Let's go to receivers, actually. And this is our snap count and opportunity dashboard, occupyfantasy.com. If you're a member, you know all about this. If you've seen our videos, you've seen us highlight this. These are the Rams snaps week 1. Xavier Smith led the way, 76%. Whittington, 65%. Wigloo, Stoops, Johnson, and Lapp finishing up with the group. We look at what they did last year in week 2. Pretty crazy. We saw DeMarcus Robinson play 90%. Tyler Johnson play 88%. And then we saw Austin Trammell, Ben Skoranek, 31 and 40%. So they will play guys heavily in preseason week 2. So maybe sprinkle is the wrong word, allocate heavily Rams receivers all throughout your lineups. Would I stack Trey Lance tonight? Probably not. There's so many receivers he's going to play with. These guys that play a full game, unless there's a situation like the Rams where their receivers are also playing most of the game, you don't need to stack them, especially if they have rushing upside like Trey Lance does. So I don't think you have to. And we actually put a note on this in the plug, and this goes to EGS's question. Any stacks look good tonight? Now, I just think you play Bennett. You can pair him with one of his receivers. Obviously, I think if you're playing by our top plays, you would play a Rams receiver with him regardless. But Willis rushing upside, Trey Lance playing a full game with a bunch of receivers plus rushing upside. I don't think you need to stack those two. Bennett you can stack, but the other two, no, not really. It's really not a stacking slate, which is kind of weird if you're coming from a regular season brain or some of the more recent preseason slates we had. But we got rushing guys playing a half or more. Just play them and play the actual best plays around them. Chris says, favorite sneaky wide receiver play. All right, so just our favorite overall plays in general are the Rams receivers. As far as sneaky, I don't know if he'll go overlooked, but let's pull up the target dashboard. Again, I have to do an industry check after this to see what the industry is on and who the highest owned plays will be. If we look at week 1, targets, Taywan Palmer, 6 targets, 114 air yards for Arizona. Let's see how many snaps he played. Again, you get this opportunity dashboard and snap dashboard, occupyfantasy.com. If you're not a member already, the link is in the description below. And we see Taywan Palmer, 46% of the snaps. We expect roughly a similar game plan from Arizona. So Palmer, looking at his results and looking at his air yards, we don't have underperforming wide receivers in preseason DFS, but Taywan Palmer, if we did, would come damn close. So he's definitely our favorite sneaky wide receiver on the slate. We actually have him as a low-risk play. We think he should play a ton and get opportunity. So, and it's not this a guy who came out of nowhere. He was getting hype in camp as well. So when you have the two married together, that is always a good look. All right, guys, let's get some more questions in. We talked about the LA receivers. they're the basis of your low risk lineups, of your core for your high risk lineups as well. Interesting situation. We pointed out in the plug in our playing time section. You also see these guys sprinkled in the high risk plays as well. Are the Washington wide receivers? I'll pull it up on DraftKings here for a second for you guys. So if you've been drafting Jahan Dotson in your best ball on your best ball teams, which, by the way, if you're not subscribed to our best ball channel here on YouTube, it's free to do so. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers over there. We opened a new channel for our streams that we do nearly daily, Occupy Best Ball. Go check it out. Jahan Dotson, not guaranteed to be the wide receiver too. Shockingly played more snaps than most people expected last week. And the coaches actually gave us some pretty good quotes after their practices on Thursday this week. Dotson is going to play roughly the same amount of snaps, in quotes, he played last week, so that's great for him. And he's battling with De'Ami Brown for, I'm watching Deneric Prince here, almost run for a touchdown. Okay. But he's battling with De'Ami Brown for the wide receiver too. Olamide Zaccheaus as well. And they specifically called out rookie draft pick Luke McCaffrey, who, if you've been under a rock, he is Christian McCaffrey's brother, extremely athletic guy. They want to get an extended look at him tonight. So we got McCaffrey, De'Ami Brown, Jahan Dotson, all these guys, great high-risk plays to, again, 8-game slate. You can get different really easily. This is where a lot of the money is made in preseason because people still concentrate on the best plays, and we have maybe plays that are slightly worse at like 1/20th the ownership. It's really great, great high-risk slate when you have these 8-gamers. All right, so we got sneaky wide receivers out of the way, got the low-risk wide receivers out of the way. It is 5:16. We'll be here 4 to 9 more minutes, 5:20, 5:25. Tight ends, no slam dunk plays. We like Ben Sinnott from Washington, rookie tight end. Zach Ertz is not going to play, so Sinnott's going to start, or at least play early and then play often. We expect him to play a lot. If we look last week, let's see here. We'll go to Washington. Ben Sinnott had 3 targets last week, which is pretty good. Played 37% of the snaps. Could play a little more tonight as they look to see how the rookie looks in extended action. But if we go with sneaky tight ends, I will say I like the indie guys, Will Mallory, Jelani Woods. All the starters are resting. That means more playing time for their tight ends. Both these guys had 2 targets last week. Both these guys are pretty good pass-catching tight ends. Where the hell is Indy? Here we go. Jelani Woods, Will Mallory. Prefer Woods. Tons. I mean, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 11 high-risk guys listed in our plug at tight end tonight. You can correlate if you want, or you can play any of these guys. Lots of great tight end options tonight. I wouldn't say great, but a decent amount of tight end options who could score some points tonight. Defenses, flip a coin. It's really what it comes down to. For those who use our lineup builder, I would limit it to probably 1 opponent per defense tonight. It's a little bit different than the 2 gamers and the 4 gamers, so limit yourself there. It's probably 2 players per team max, 3 if you're going up to the Rams, maybe 4. If you're including Bennett. So just keep that in mind as you're playing around with the settings, because remember, the lineup builder does work for preseason DFS. Our top players are already loaded in the builder for tonight. I think that'll do it. So let's recap. Quarterbacks. If you're not using one of these 3, you're in trouble. It's Trey Lance, Stetson Bennett, Malik Willis. The Rams running backs we like a lot. Obviously, they're probably only going to play 2. Miami running backs, it could be a little crowded to start, but they have huge upside. That is Salvon Ahmed. That is Jalen Wright. That is Chris Brooks. Like the Rams wide receivers, obviously sneaky options. Tawan Palmer for Arizona. Also like the Washington receivers. And tight ends, there's so many tonight. Literally, we have 11 high risk, 2 low risk listed in our daily plug. If you haven't checked it out already, now's a great time. As little as as little as $7 per week. Seemingly a member wins a GPP every single slate, every single day. Showdown, Classic, doesn't matter. You've seen the tweets. So, yeah, maybe it's your turn next. So, let's see. CLJ says, is Russell Wilson not a play tonight? No, he's going to play a quarter. Again, we're not looking to play guys who are playing a quarter. There are 3 quarterbacks you want to play. If you're not playing those 3, pack it up. Yeah, Russell Wilson going to play a quarter. Even if he played a half, he's not as good as the 3 guys we're playing in terms of upside. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before the regular season starts. So do your part. Click subscribe. great free way to support the channel, and it helps you out because you'll get notified when we go live with these videos. Only a few more slates left tomorrow, and then all the slates in preseason week 3 next week. Get notified by being subscribed here on YouTube. Final question from Taylor: how much is Sam Howell going to play? Again, part of a team that has refused to really say anything about playing time. He played into the third quarter last week. They're resting a little more guys this week. I'd be shocked if he played into the third quarter again. We're expecting roughly a half each for Sam Howell and PJ Walker. So not a bad play. He could play a little less just based on if they flip it from last week. But Sam Howell, an option nonetheless. Let's just say conservatively a half a football for Sam Howell. All right, guys, that'll do it. Appreciate you watching. As always, go check out the Daily Plug. We'll keep that updated through lock. 6 games starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. Notes are going to be flying in, so make sure you're updating frequently. Make sure you're in Discord, occupyfantasy.com/Discord, so you get the latest updates as well. I'm Brian for Occupy Fantasy. Thank you for listening, and good luck, and enjoy tonight's 8-game preseason NFL DFS.